We got ESPN on ESPN Crime, Kirk Herbstreit versus Elle Duncan. The man is easily offended. He has a chip on his shoulder all the time. I'm a little bit in the gray area here on Elle Duncan and what it is exactly that she does with SportsCenter, but the same. I don't need to be able to tell who you're rooting for at any time. Now, going back to your experience brings us back to Kirk Herbstreit and Elle Duncan. Kirk Herbstreit is very, very good at what he does. ESPN seemingly never disappoints now. They've got bans on talking politics. They've got bans on all sorts of things. They're sticking to sports. They're getting back to being all about sports. I even saw the ESPN promo for their new direct-to-consumer app recently. I liked it. It was nostalgic. It had the first words ever uttered on ESPN back in the late 70s about it being sports heaven and welcome to sports heaven. Well, not exactly heaven right now with Kirk Herbstreit and Elle Duncan, because Kirk Herbstreit decided to go on a podcast with the comedian John Crist, and here's what he had to say about Elle Duncan.
I don't think you can cheer when you do games. It's like on a national level. But you're right. Guys that are in a studio show nationally, you watch SportsCenter and, Elle Duncan is sitting there cheering for Georgia. She's Georgia, openly cheering. Yeah. So I'm not a fan of that personally, but I guess I think it hurts your credibility when that team is playing other teams.
So, of course, this goes national. People start talking about it. And Elle Duncan decides to fire back on X with the following. This is a response to the awful announcing story, talking about what Kirk Herbstreit said about how he does not like fans in the media. Elle Duncan says, didn't have this on my bingo card for today, but my fandom doesn't impact in any way what or how we talk about teams on air. Ever, I just bark. Also, whispers. I'm not the only one. So why I get singled out? Elle Duncan there simultaneously throwing shade at Kirk Herbstreit, acting like, hey, it's not that big of a deal, while also playing victim at the very end. Why me? Why am I the one that's singled out for it? I don't know. Probably because Kirk Herbstreit was calling a big game and they throw it back to SportsCenter and you're barking on air because Georgia won that big game and that pissed him off or that bothered him. Let's start with this with Kirk Herbstreit. The man is easily offended. I love Kirk Herbstreit. I think he is terrific at his job. This guy has a long history of going ballistic on people on social media. He has a chip on his shoulder all the time, especially about things like being called an Ohio State homer. If you want to start a fight with Kirk Herbstreit, walk up and say, when you called that Ohio State game 17 years ago, it felt like you were cheering for the Buckeyes during the broadcast. This is a cardinal sin in the eyes of Kirk Herbstreit, something he will not stand for. It is blasphemy to the level of him kicking your ass, whether that be digitally on X or to your face, if you're to say that to him. He does not like it. That is one thing that will set him off. And look, everybody's got things that will set them off. Everyone's got something about a broadcast or a broadcaster they don't like. I'll give you an example. I don't like when people's pets become the focal point of a broadcast. I'm talking to you, Kirk Herbstreit, on this. That's just a personal preference of mine. I don't need to hear your dog barking, and I don't need to see your dog jumping in the lap of Lee Corso during College game day. That doesn't add to my experience. That's my personal preference. That's something that I don't like. Now, there are a lot of people who probably think that it's very cute and whatever, and they like it, or they don't mind it that much. I'm not one of those people. I don't like it. It bothers me. It bothers me when the dog is there during games. It bothers me when the dog's on set for College game day. And again, I will say all of this while saying I think Kirk Herbstreit is terrific at what he does. One of the very best, both as an analyst on a studio in a desk, in the desk format on College game day, and while calling games. He's elite. He's great at what he does. And when I listen to Kirk Herbstreit call a game, he's right. I don't hear any bias. I don't hear him rooting for anyone. I don't get a sense that he likes one team more than another. I don't get any of that. The guy's a pro when he's calling games. Everything except for the dog stuff, but whatever. Again, I'm talking about personal preference right now. Now, personal preference, this is an argument about what you want to see with, let's say, a SportsCenter anchor like an Elle Duncan. So Kirk Herbstreit, his personal preference is, I don't want to turn on SportsCenter and hear someone barking because they're a Georgia Bulldogs fan. Let's back it up a little bit. I don't want to hear a grown-up bark ever. So if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan or a Cleveland Browns fan or whatever you are, just stop the barking. Let's just do away with barking for good, and then we don't have to worry about grown-ups barking ever again. That's one thing that I could see eliminated from all fandom, period. But to the main point about SportsCenter anchors barking or being a fan of someone, I'm going to lay out the different levels of broadcast for you and give you my rationale as to what I think the parameters and expectations should be for all of these different people, and explain why I'm a little bit in the gray area here on Elle Duncan and what it is exactly that she does with SportsCenter. Because now she's on a terrible new show on ESPN that I watched 10 minutes of, and I turned it off immediately. But she is very much a hype person / entertainer, which is one of the categories I'm going to get into. So let's start with a different category. I'm going with national broadcast teams, national studio analyst, team broadcasters. These are people specific to a television broadcast or radio broadcast of a team. And then I've got another category that's sort of a catch-all analyst, hype man, entertainer, content creator type person. Let's start with broadcast teams. And this is where Kirk Herbstreit falls into this category. Kirk Herbstreit is on the national broadcast team for college football. As a member of a broadcast team that covers national games, you have to be right down the middle. You do. And I don't care if your network has an allegiance to one league over another or any of that. If you're calling an SEC game versus a Big Ten game, and even if you're ESPN and you don't have the Big Ten, but you have the SEC, if I'm watching on ABC on Saturday night, or if I'm watching at 11 a.m. on ESPN, you need to call it right down the middle. Kirk Herbstreit's right about that. I think how he approaches his job as a lead analyst on the college football game of the week is completely appropriate and 100% correct. That's how you do it. Straight down the middle. I don't need to be able to tell who you're rooting for at all. And I can't with Kirk Herbstreit because he's very good at his job. Obviously, color commentator, play-by-play guy or girl, different in that respect, but the same. I don't need to be able to tell who you're rooting for at any time. Now, going back to your experience or when you played or where you played or we would see this or we practice like this, I think that's fine for a color analyst. I really do. Some people don't agree. I think when they get into their own personal experience, totally fine with that. I just don't need to be able to tell who you're rooting for or just completely separate yourself from it. Don't root at all. Mike Tirico is a great example of this. Mike Tirico grew up a New York Mets fan, and he is adamant that he gave up fandom when he became a broadcaster. Now, I find that hard to believe as someone that works in sports and is a diehard sports fan, that you can just decide, I am no longer a fan of this because I am a professional, and I am right down the middle, and I will be a professional, and I want to have credibility the rest of my life and career. I think it's hard to separate being a fan. But Mike Tirico claims that you can and that he has. Well, good for him. But that's what I want in a broadcaster. I want Mike Tirico. I want Kirk Herbstreit calling a game where I can't tell where they went to school or who they root for. So, broadcast teams is one of them. Studio analyst. So when Kirk Herbstreit puts his studio analyst hat on and he's on ESPN College Game Day, and now suddenly he's talking about the teams, I think you can allow for a little bit more of your experience to shine through in this. Now, if I'm watching College Game Day, as the example, I don't need to see you hyping up one team over another because you coached them or you played there or any of that. But if you want to talk more about being an Ohio State player or knowing what it's like living in Columbus, or if you're Pat McAfee, who we'll get to momentarily, if you want to talk about West Virginia or hype them up a little bit, I'm a little bit more okay with it. So let's say it's 90-10. If it's 100% full credibility, I don't need to know who you're rooting for or where you went to school or where you grew up on a national broadcast. I think it's 90-10 as a studio analyst. 90%, give it to me straight, down the middle. Don't need to know who you root for, where you went to school. 10%, okay, let's rely on your experience and be honest about where you're from. Number 3, team broadcasters. Anything goes. Literally anything. If you want to wear a dog mask as the Cleveland Browns radio announcer during the game and bark till your heart's content, have at it. Do not care. Do whatever you want. Whatever your fan base is into and whatever they like, do it. You can celebrate. You can be calm. You can act like you're impartial and don't care who wins, or you can be the biggest homer on the planet. I think all rules are out the window when it's a team broadcast. 4, hype man / entertainer. And this is the Pat McAfee department. This is Stephen A. Smith when it comes to the New York Knicks. Hell, this is me and Jonathan Hutton on a show like this where it's content creation, it's sports show, it's digital, we're going to be honest about where we're from. I think anything goes with that too. I really do. Now, to what level you're going to take me saying that I went to the University of Tennessee and that I'm a Tennessee fan, or Jonathan Hutton talking about the Titans or whatever. If you're going to take that info and say, oh, they're not credible at all anymore because they are actually honest about their fandom and who they like, I mean, that's on the audience. That's on the consumer to decide for themselves on that. I personally prefer it when someone can be intellectually honest with their audience and tell them, here's where I went to school. I grew up going to these baseball games during the summer. I grew up rooting for this team. I really like it when this team does well. I think it's fun. I really do. That doesn't turn me off of a show because someone is stating where they came from or who they're a fan of. I think Bill Simmons, from the national perspective, is a good example of this. Bill Simmons made his living as a Boston sports guy, as a diehard Celtics, Red Sox, Patriots fan, Boston Bruins fan. He is a New England guy. He is a Boston guy. That's not going to stop me from listening to Bill Simmons' take on Luka Doncic being traded to the Lakers because I know he's a Celtics fan. Again, I'm not here to tell people how to consume media, how to feel about it, what to like and what not to like. I'm giving you my own personal experience and perspective on it. That doesn't bother me. I think Bill Simmons is good at talking about the NBA. I think Bill Simmons is good talking about old movies and TV shows. I will listen to and watch Bill Simmons talk about those things. And the fact that he's a huge Boston Celtics fan doesn't change my opinion on Bill Simmons and whether or not he's good at media or not. I think he's very good. Brings us back to Kirk Herbstreit and Elle Duncan. Kirk Herbstreit is very, very good at what he does. And I think that going about it the way he does from a national broadcast perspective is the right way to do it. It's the professional way to do it, and he knows that. When it comes to SportsCenter anchors, I'm going to be polite about this. It's not like we're going live to the Vatican and they're delivering news on the Pope and who the next Pope is going to be. It's fun. It's SportsCenter. SportsCenter became SportsCenter because Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann and Stuart Scott had funny catchphrases for things that happened in games. Now, I don't know what teams they rooted for. To Kirk Herbstreit's point about it, they didn't root for teams live on air. So I do get some of that. But with Elle Duncan annoys me. She may be great to someone else, but I don't know that this is the end-all, be-all, or the hill to die on if you're Kirk Herbstreit with her and how she does her job. Again, if it's a little bit here and there, fine. I can also understand how Kirk would be upset if all of a sudden you're calling a game and it goes back to SportsCenter in the studio and Elle Duncan is doing a big, victory lap over the Georgia Bulldogs winning. Check out this mustache on Keith Olbermann. This may have been another reason for the success of SportsCenter back in the day. Terrific. Very early 90s tie selection from Keith Olbermann, too. I wonder if Keith was a whack job then. We just didn't know about it because he was sitting next to the very honorable Dan Patrick, one of my all-time favorites, still one of my favorites in Dan Patrick. So, again, I don't really want to declare a winner or loser in this ESPN on ESPN battle. I think ESPN loses in this when their on-air personalities get into a tussle like this. I'll just say that Kirk Herbstreit is very good at what he does. I think he knows he's very good at what he does. I think he's very, very sensitive at all times to a lot of things. I don't like Kirk Herbstreit having a dog in the booth for games. Kirk Herbstreit doesn't like Elle Duncan barking during a broadcast. I guess that's one thing we can all three agree on. I don't like any of those things that went on with the barking or the actual barking of the dog with Kirk Herbstreit. So Elle Duncan didn't think she was going to have that on her bingo card over the 4th of July weekend, having to battle it out with ESPN legend Kirk Herbstreit. I didn't think that I was going to have Golf Digest laying the people's elbow on Hugh Freeze's career at Auburn on my bingo card over the weekend, but that's exactly what happened. Because Golf Digest posted a report, and this is based on a piece by Alabama.com that ranked SEC coaches with time spent on the golf course. Hugh Freeze, currently at Auburn, 2026 recruiting class, ranked 80th. That's right, 80th nationally. Golf Digest saying that maybe a reason for that, or at least people believe this, he golfs too much. He's checked out. I'll say this. I talked to 3 different people over the course of the weekend and today that are pretty closely connected to Auburn football. All 3 of them, to various extents, gave me the impression that there is an impression about Hugh Freeze that the dude has checked out. That mentally, he's okay if they lose and he gets fired and there's a buyout involved. That he doesn't have the fire in the belly anymore. Again, I don't know. I don't talk to Hugh Freeze. I don't know one way or the other. I believe people can play golf and do their job. But the issue arises when you're playing a ton of golf and when your job is to recruit top talent to a top football program like Auburn, and the results are 80th nationally. 80th. Let's put that up there again. 80th nationally in recruiting. You know what that puts you around, the company? Not Alabama, not Georgia, not LSU, hell, not even Arkansas, not the teams you're competing with in the SEC. It puts you in the company of Tulsa and Colorado State and Sacramento State and Oregon State. This is not the company you wish to keep if you were the Auburn head football coach. Now, maybe he wants to keep the company of the senior tour at some point. That's why he's doing a lot of golfing. But I'm telling you, this is a very real thing with Hugh Freeze. Whether fair or not, whether true or not, there are a lot of people around the Auburn program that believe he's checked out and that ultimately he's okay if he gets fired at Auburn. And here's the other problem that he's battling right now. And there's money at Auburn, trust me. But the money at Auburn, the boosters, they're sitting around saying to themselves, we gave you a ton of money for last year's recruiting class and for transfers. Are we going to continue to invest money in you before you win this year? A lot's riding on this year. Jackson Arnold coming in at quarterback from Oklahoma. There's a lot riding on this season for Hugh Freeze and Auburn. I think there's a lot of people with deep pockets that are waiting to see if he wins a few games before they donate and help bail him out of what right now is an atrocious recruiting class for 2026. So we'll wait and see. We'll see how good his golf game gets in the meantime. U.S. Soccer, I guess they can start to work on their golf game. They reached the end of the CONCACAF Gold Cup. They made it to the championship match against Mexico. And in that championship match against Mexico, they lose 2-1 in front of a crowd in these United States of America in Houston that were filled with 70% Mexican fans and supporters. This coming off a match against Guatemala in St. Louis, where it was 80-20, maybe, Guatemalan fans in St. Louis. I really want to get behind U.S. Soccer. I'm an American. It was 4th of July weekend. I'm trying to get behind America. I'm trying to get into this. But we knew the outcome when this match started, if we're being honest with ourselves. Mexico was going to dominate time of possession. They were going to force the issue, and eventually they were going to win by a goal. And that's exactly what happened. And America's soccer team, once again, a bunch of losers, this time to Mexico, in front of a very ecstatic home crowd in Houston. Home. 70% Mexican fans. United States soil, watching Team USA go down. So now, for all the U.S. soccer fans, we get to wait around until the World Cup where they lose to some team with a country that's GDP is lower than South Dakota's. And that's going to be the next thing to look forward to for U.S. soccer. And I hate to say it, but damn it, I wish they were better. And we can get into all the contributing factors about how all these other countries, their top athletes all play soccer and our 8th best athletes play soccer. Let me put it to you plainly. Our 8th best athletes are way better than most countries in the world's best athletes. If we had a better soccer infrastructure, better coaching, better development, give me American athletes. We'll be fine. We'll be good. Teach skill. Develop. Learn something from European systems. Learn something from South America. Hell, in this instance, learn something from Mexico. And maybe you're going to be winning championships and doing way more in the World Cup than you are right now. We got way more coming up on the show today. When we come back, 4th of July weekend, we drafted 4th of July movies and television shows this past Friday. I got to see one that may be added to my list forever this past weekend. I went to the movies. I've got a review, and I've got a movie that I will not be reviewing because of something the director of said movie said. That's all coming up next. This is Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network.